Welcome once again to the Chapter 49 podcast. My name is Larry Lannan, a volunteer and a retiree for Chapter 49. Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. So we're very happy that you joined us. We have both an audio and a video podcast. You might be, you may be using either platform to watch or listen. If you want to listen, it's very easy to find one of our podcasts. Go to just about any platform. We're on most platforms where there are podcasts. Just search podcasts by Larry Lannan, Lannan. You'll see all the podcasts I produce. The Chapter 49 podcast is part of that. If you would like to go to YouTube, you can find our podcast there. Just search for Duncan Giles. There's more than one, but you'll find the one that has the Chapter 49 podcasts. And you'll find that we've been doing that for several months now. You'll find all of our video podcasts since we started that project. And speaking of projects, Duncan and I are now more than a year and a half into our project called the Chapter 49 podcast. And I welcome Duncan Giles back to the podcast. You know, Duncan, I do want to say one thing. Last time we did a podcast, I was a little pressed for time. Didn't have a chance to set up my video. Not that I can make myself look any much better, but the lighting was such a mess. I sort of looked like a villain in a 1950s horror film. So I've tried to improve it some. I'm not sure I improved it much, but hopefully we did a little better job this time.
I think the lighting is better, and I do want to add a proviso when you're talking about, you can watch the, the podcast or listen to the podcast. If you're both watching and listening to the podcast, I would suggest getting some help immediately if you're doing both of those.
Both of them, yeah. You're like, you have way too much time on your hands. Well, let's get down to business. And, we're still far away from just saying everything's fine, we'll see you next week, because we have plenty of issues to deal with. And this is like a broken record. I mean, how many years? I started working for the federal government in 1983, and I've lost, of course, I've been retired for 10 years, but I've lost count of how many government shutdowns there have been. Our continuing resolution ends on Friday of this week. We're recording this on Thursday. It looked like for a while there would be another continuing resolution into January to allow the Congress to finally get on the same page about government budgets. Well, guess what? We have something called a vaccine mandate, which is creating a political kerfuffle, if you will. So there are some people in Congress who want to make a stand and demanding that vaccine mandates be taken off the table as part of any continuing resolution. That has gummed up the works. Where we thought everything was going to be fine, all of a sudden it's not fine. And Duncan, this is what happens. Sometimes continuing resolutions or actual budget agreements happen usually very quickly when they do happen, and they just all of a sudden the agreement is there. We thought we had an agreement at least for more time on a continuing resolution, and guess what? We've got an issue to gum up the works. So tell me your view. What do you think about all these developments that we're seeing?
Yeah, it's an absolute shocker that something's coming up the works, isn't it? It's just never happened before. I was like you saying, okay, they're going to kick the can down the road probably to January. There have been some in Congress who wanted to do a full year continuing resolution or several months because they haven't gotten enough time to get together to talk about the appropriations and pass them, which just makes me want to pound my head against the wall when I hear things like that. But now it does look like, and I do truly believe we will have a shutdown. The reason being is I think we will get a continuing resolution that'll go till January, that'll pass the House narrowly. This is my prediction. And it'll go to the Senate. And in the Senate, in these types of circumstances, one senator can block it. And I'm betting there'll be at least one that will block it for, for whatever reason. I'm not even going to go into that because it'll start making me use words that I shouldn't use on a podcasts that might be viewed by children. Why they'd want to watch this, I don't know, but you never know.
Just so you know, we're not governed by the FCC, but we do try to keep this a family podcast. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think it would be I'm hoping it'll just be a short podcast that someone will use this just to make a point, and that we would have a continuing resolution passed, that we would be reopened by Monday. I would anticipate being shut down over the weekend. Hopefully it's not longer. I would urge everyone to, watch the news. Our Facebook page at NTU Chapter 49 Indiana will have the most updated information. We'll get stuff out there as soon as we can, but I think that there is a real danger of at least a very short shutdown, and that drives me crazy.
Well, and the thing is, in Indiana, we don't have many people working on a weekend, maybe a few. But like a campus, there are usually people working on the weekends, and there are some people throughout the country at IRS who are working at a weekend. They will be impacted by this.
Absolutely. And, some of our folks that do view this podcast that don't work for the IRS, such as, a lot of my good friends at Customs and Border Protection. Those folks work, every day. So this could impact something like them, where they could be called accepted employees and be called into work, regardless of whether they're going to get paid on time or not. This, if it is a long shutdown, it can absolutely have a devastating effect, because we have so many people that live paycheck to paycheck, and I abhor politicians who play games with people's paychecks. And I just hope that doesn't happen.
One thing that people need to be aware of, and there's been some publicity on some of these federal employee websites that specialize in news about the federal government. There was a law passed a while back about shutdowns, but I do want to make clear something, and you sort of alluded to this. When there's a shutdown, there's no authority to pay people. However, there is a new law that does now, for the first time, guarantee back pay after a shutdown ends, but it doesn't help you during the shutdown. Just want to make that clear to people.
Exactly. So, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. It's tough to tell, your mortgage company, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday if you'll let me slide on the mortgage payment today. Because we will get paid eventually, but it just depends on how long the shutdown goes as to how long folks are without a paycheck. And I don't want to have to put anybody through that. So I would urge everyone on their own time and not on a government computer to go to the NTU website. It's very easy to click the link there and urge your representatives and your senators to, pass at least a continuing resolution. At the very least, pass a continuing resolution. We need our budget passed, but at this point, that's down the road. We need a continuing resolution passed ASAP, so your pay is not interrupted.
And we're going to talk about vaccine mandates a little later in the podcast, but vaccine mandates are not just in the federal government. They're out in the private sector being battled out in the courts right now, and judges are making various opinions, so issuing various rulings, so that'll have to be settled over time. But I've seen a lot of political footballs, hot potatoes, get mixed in with the government funding, be it continuing resolution or a final budget. And now vaccine mandates have been the latest one. It's just sad to see that people are playing games with our budgets, our ability to serve the public and do what we need to do in public service, because there's a disagreement about a vaccine mandate.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I don't really like the mandate. I think that folks should get vaccinated, absolutely. But a mandate is not my favorite way to go about doing it. I understand why it was done. I understand why the administration is doing what they're doing, but it's not my favorite. But to tie in things like the federal government funding for the entire government because of these, or the debt ceiling because of these, is just not the place to do it. It absolutely isn't.
Well, let's go to the debt ceiling, because it has, I won't say the same effect, it has a debilitating effect on the government's ability to do business, and quite frankly, has a debilitating impact on the entire economy. It's interesting that there were certain politicians pounding their chests and their fists on the table saying, we're never going to vote for a debt ceiling increase. What I am finding is that many of them are changing their tunes because the commercial interests in their states and districts and the banks from their states and districts are telling them that they will never forgive them if they allow the debt ceiling not to be raised, because this will have an amazing impact in a bad way for the American economy. Yet again, there are people in Washington playing games with this. We've talked extensively about the debt ceiling, about the fact that really shouldn't even be there. And no country anything like ours has a debt ceiling. This was put in during World War II to bring some people over to vote for the funding for, World War One, to
Right.
pass the funding for World War One, and it's never been taken off the books. It really doesn't have a legitimate reason to be there, but it is there, and it does have an impact. So, the debt ceiling, what are the prospects that you're seeing on this?
Yeah, that's one of those things that, according to Treasury Secretary Yellen, she's looking at a date of around December the 15th, where the U.S. will reach its debt ceiling and not able to pay its fair obligations, which, as you alluded to, would cause massive market crashes, not just in the U.S., but I believe worldwide, because of the fact that, okay, this is basically saying the U.S. can't pay its debts. And this would impact things like paying federal employees on time. So there's huge issues around this. There shouldn't be. This is to pay for obligations that have already been passed and, signed into law and are out there. This is not for new spending. This is for what our obligations already are, be it the current administration or past administrations. So it needs to be passed. The debt ceiling needs to be raised. It's just one of those things. We shouldn't have it, but we do. But it should not be. It has been a political football for both sides, and it should not be. Absolutely.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past, how both Republican and Democratic politicians have used this, and it just needs to end. In fact, if it was up to me, we would just do away with the debt ceiling in every way. There's no reason to have that anymore. All we're doing is giving our own government the ability to pay the bills it's already incurred in past budgets. So this is it's insanity, but it's still there. And we will watch this. This can have an impact on the government because, as we've said before, and I was in management when we thought the debt ceiling was going to be reached at a certain point. And what surprised me as a manager is just the chaos within the management community itself, because there was a genuine question as to what bills you could pay and which ones you couldn't. So it would be massive confusion and just a bad situation for everyone if that happens.
There's no win with the debt ceiling default.
Yeah,
absolutely none.
And then once you have a default, it's on the record that impacts your economy going forward. It's something it's like a blemish you can't take off of your record as a nation. Well, Duncan, we have talked extensively about vaccine mandates. It didn't lead our podcast because we have these other crushing things going on, just being able to stay at work with the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution to fund the government. We have been talking for weeks about the vaccine mandate issued by President Biden for federal employees in the executive branch. I do want to make one clarification for people. I've heard a lot of talk about, well, why is it that the Postal Service doesn't have the same rules we have? Why is it that Federal Communications Commission or other parts of government don't have the same rules we have? Well, let me tell you, there are different ways government entities are governed. For example, the Postal Service, their decisions are made by an independent board. Now, the president and others appoint members to that board, but the board makes the decision. But if you're an executive branch agency, meaning the president, Treasury Department, IRS, which is our line of command, you is traced right back to the president. The president makes our decisions for us on these major issues like vaccine mandates. So the Postal Service, the president cannot order the Postal Service, to have a vaccine mandate. So there are some differences. Federal Communications Commission is a very small agency represented by NTEU, but those decisions are made by the commission, the members of which were appointed by Congress and the president for specific terms. I'm saying all this because we've been talking about what the presidential executive order was saying. The deadlines have come and gone in many cases, but we're waiting on some more. But we've had a last minute change since you and I have last talked about the vaccine mandate. So let's get the latest, Duncan.
Yeah, basically what has come out, the guidance from the Office of Management and Budget and OPM, is that they want to slow down the punishment, so to speak, for folks who have not been fully vaccinated. The deadline to be fully vaccinated was November 22nd. And if you weren't fully vaccinated by then, they were going to start rolling out, counseling letters, which did go out before then. And then the suspensions would start. They were going to look at 3-day suspensions. Well, now they've come back and said, let's hold off on doing any suspensions. Let's continue to educate people. I want to make very, very clear to folks that this is almost like a reprieve from the governor for somebody who's going to be executed. These things are still coming. This is not something that's going to go away. They're looking at not rolling out suspensions until after the holidays. So we want to make sure that, they want to make sure that everybody gets educated, that people know why they should be vaccinated and why it's a good idea to be vaccinated, before they start doing suspensions and then eventually terminations for folks who don't do that. I can't urge strongly enough for anybody who has not been vaccinated, who thinks this is a get out of jail free card, that they don't have to worry about it, things of that nature, that is a bad assumption. You're getting some more time to think about your life choices, your options. People who have not been vaccinated are, depending upon the study, anywhere from 4 to 5 times more likely to catch COVID-19, especially with the new Omicron virus variant out there. More than 10 times more likely to be hospitalized, and more than 14 times more likely to pass away due to COVID-19. This isn't a hoax. There's nobody that's manufacturing this with weird things or putting in the Bill Gates tracking, things of that nature. That's not happening. This is stuff that is very serious, that these variants keep appearing because not enough people have been vaccinated. And that's occurring all over the world, not just in the US. So what I believe will be happening is that, we still have the folks with reasonable accommodations out there, that have not heard anything yet. There's thousands of them, so that's going to take some time. But we need to be prepared that if you do not get vaccinated and your accommodation is not granted, or it's something that it is granted, but it's not an accommodation that works for you, because we don't know what the accommodation will be. It has to be reasonable to the government, that there could be some serious consequences. That I read just this morning that, between the Navy and the Air Force, almost zero religious accommodations were granted out of the thousands that they had. So it's they're going to be looking at this all over the government very closely. And I just want to make sure everyone is prepared for this, making the right choice for you and your family. I want everybody to be healthy. That's what the messages come from NTU National, whether it be National President Tony Reardon, Vice President Jim Bailey, new National VP-elect Doreen Greenwald, our Director of Negotiations Ken Moffitt, et al. Everybody is the same way as I am. We want our employees to be safe and healthy above everything else. And the best way to do that in this pandemic is to be vaccinated. And that's why I so strongly urge people to do this, even, take advantage of this minor break, for lack of a better term, to make sure that you do weigh your choices carefully. And if you are leaning at all towards getting vaccinated, please do so.
I think your comparison was very interesting. There's a difference between a governor's reprieve and a pardon. A
Yeah,
reprieve is a delay, a pardon. There are no pardons out there at the moment. There are reprieve, which is a delay. So I think your point is well taken that service and the government in general, for all of its employees, want to provide every chance for employees to educate themselves and understand what the stakes are in terms of vaccination. And the suspensions haven't happened yet, but it looks like they may be coming as early as January. So we'll see. But the reason I thought this was an important issue is that you and I have been talking for weeks about how these dates are out there, and the government was steadfast about the dates. They're moving the dates back, and I think for two reasons. One, for the education, and what's one reason? The other reason is they don't really want to be doing this during the holiday season if they can. So
correct. I mean, nobody wants to suspend or terminate somebody during the holidays. Merry Christmas. Sorry, it's your last day. Nobody wants to do that. I don't want to see that happen to anybody. I want everybody to go when they're ready to go. Because we have so many hardworking employees in the state of Indiana and across the country that do such a great job. And I want them to be able to work here and be able to leave on their own terms. And to be able to do that, they're going to need to either be vaccinated or have an accommodation that works for them.
well, one thing that's continuing, it is still in place, it's been in place for a very long time. It's the evacuation order. As you and I have talked about before, people have been working at home either all the time or mostly all the time. The reason they're not coming into the office is because this evacuation order is in place for IRS. You were speculating that since Social Security Administration had already announced it was coming back to the office, their evacuation order would be rescinded as of January 3rd of 2022. You were speculating, well, will the IRS do that? Well, we don't know. We might speculate there's 30 days notice required before that evacuation order is rescinded. But now with the Omicron variant having been discovered and spreading throughout the world, a new variant, and we're still studying, the scientists are still studying what that's going to do to the entire pandemic. And the fact that we still have some people who are not vaccinated. It's a large percentage that are vaccinated, but we still have, even though it's a smaller percentage, substantial numbers in the thousands of people in the federal workforce who have not been vaccinated yet. What will happen with that evacuation order? I think you are starting to hear some rumblings that are quite different than what we heard before. So tell us what you are hearing.
Yeah. Before I was hearing that there was a lot of leaning towards that January 3rd date to reopen offices. Because as you said, everybody is working. They're just working mostly from home where they can. I've now been hearing that they have, especially with the developments over the last week with Omicron, however we pronounce it, it's
there's no N in Omicron. It's Omicron, no N.
Omicron.
The president and Dr. Fauci have both mispronounced it, and many journalists have pointed this out. I think they've now changed their tune.
And I've done the same thing. I've put that darn N in there. But with this new variant out there, and I will take to task IRS leadership quite often and have, but I truly believe that the very top echelons from the commissioner on down are concerned about employee safety, and they do want to. They are concerned about that. I can tell you that the national office folks I mentioned, led by National President Tony Reardon, health and safety are the utmost in their minds. I myself am extremely concerned about reopening offices, especially when we have vaccinated and unvaccinated people mixing, because I just do not have faith that management will be able, local management and wherever they are, will be able to maintain masking policies and social distancing policies. That is a huge concern to me. And I know it is to our national NTU, and privately, I think it's also a concern to national IRS. So I do believe that they are not going to be reopening in January. Now, when that reopening of the offices is going to be, I'm not sure, but I don't believe it's going to be January, which I think is actually very smart on everybody's part not to do something like that at this time.
So the evacuation order continues in place. There's been no notification of the 30 days before that happens. And what you're hearing is you don't expect that to happen soon.
Correct.
And so things will probably continue on as they have for, gosh, how long has it been, Duncan? Has it been almost 2 years? It's a year and a half.
March of 2020 is when we kick this fun ball off.
So it's well over a year and a half that this has been in place. I want to end this podcast. The last issue I want to talk about. Tony Reardon, our national president, is called upon to testify before Congress on many occasions. And he did testify before a House subcommittee the other day. And the subject matter was, what will the federal workforce look like? What type of federal workforce are we going to be seeing post-pandemic? We're eventually going to get over this. We just still don't know when. But as we emerge out of a pandemic, what will the federal workforce look like, and what should the federal government look toward with its workforce? And he made 4 very important points, and I'll ask you to kind of elaborate on. The first thing he talked about is the fact that the federal government as an employer needs to work hard on all sorts of flexible work arrangements. That would include flexi place, that would include flexi time, moving the time around, all the different other possibilities out there where employees can move their schedules around so they can fit their family life, for example. Fair pay is important. We've had a pay act in there for a long time, but it's never been followed as the statute intended it to be followed. Should we look at that? A robust benefit package. Anybody will tell you that that's a big selling point in technology companies, really any company that's emerging and trying to attract young people. They want a good benefits program. The federal government does okay, but we have areas where the government could improve that. And finally, one other part of that is where management is willing to collaborate with employees on how the workplace should look and how their employees should be treated. And I do believe that NTEU has been very active in trying to get that done. Sometimes management has been very cooperative. Sometimes they have not on this issue. So those are 4 very important ingredients to the future federal workforce. I'd sort of like to get your take on that, Duncan.
Yeah, as Tony so aptly was talking about, the better that we can make the federal workforce be more appealing to any generation out there. I'm not going to go through and name all the different generations out there, but to all of them, the better off that we will be as a whole. We need to attract younger and more diverse workforce. That's absolutely true. Many of us are seasoned. Present company absolutely included in that. And it's things, I go back to, and this is many, many years ago, a former chief steward of ours, Brian Kostick. Brian went into a meeting with a manager and a second level manager, and because there was a credit hours issue, and so he actually brought in and had flashcards and took out flashcards, and it's like 4 + 4 = 8. 6 + 2 = 8. As long as you're getting that 8 hours of work, does it matter when it has to be for that? The second level manager called me, who was very incensed about being treated like a child, and I had to put the phone on mute because I was laughing hysterically. But I mean, it's absolutely true. You need to have those types of flexibilities, and this happened well over 15 years ago, but it's still true today. You need to have those types of flexibilities. We worked very hard in the agreement for things like MaxiFlex, so we can have those hours rearranged whenever possible. We expanded telework to more employees so we could make that more attractive. The pay thing has gotten very interesting. One of our key ways that the service brings people in is in call sites, in campuses as well, but in call sites. And right now, where call sites are starting at here in Indianapolis, for example, for around $17 an hour. Well, now it's gotten to the point where we're competing with fast food places that are paying that almost as a starting salary. So, in looking at the pay things that, if we don't get something done on the Fair Pay Act to raise this, we're not going to be attracting people. If you can go to work and do fast food for the same price, you could come in and, answer all these, hundreds of calls a day from folks who need help and are very oftentimes upset and irate because they've waited so long to A, get through, and B, because we don't have enough people to be able to work their issues. It's going very slowly. It's going to be very tough. So those are all very, very tough issues that need to be looked at, as well as working together. You cannot have an engaged workforce, as our former guest on the show, Andy Reitmeyer, who's in charge of engagement with the IRS. I think he would absolutely agree that if you're not getting the employees' input, if you're not listening to what they're saying, if the leaders at the very top aren't hearing this and adjusting accordingly, your workforce is going to get disillusioned. They're not going to want to stay. They're not going to be invested, and they're going to want to leave. So these are all, Tony, as usual, and I hate to say nice things about him because I know he listens to this podcast, is absolutely on point as usual. And these are all very important issues that Congress should be looking at, trying to help other, all the federal government agencies that NTU represents, as well as ones we don't, in trying to make the federal workforce a more attractive employer to everyone.
Well, Duncan, our time is just about up. Final comment from you.
I just, again, you see what's going on in the world, and I just want everybody to be safe, healthy. I don't want to see anybody go back into a hospital, or God forbid, one of our members pass because of, the Delta variant, Omicron, whatever variant it is. So please, 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 get vaccinated for yourself, for your friends, for your family, for your fellow employees. And let's try and start knocking this thing down so we can get back to some sense of normalcy.
You heard Duncan Giles. He's our chapter president for Chapter 49, representing IRS employees in the state of Indiana. So we thank you for watching and listening to our Chapter 49 podcast. As Duncan mentioned earlier, we do have a Facebook page. We try to update as regularly as we can. You can find it on Facebook. Just search under NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana. Like or follow us, and you should be getting our updates on your news feed, although I don't pretend to understand the Facebook algorithm. Leave that alone. But thank you once again for watching and listening. We will be back next week if all goes well. So we, once again, at Chapter 49, want you all to be safe and please be kind.